The floor is cold against my cheek. Not just temperature cold, but the kind of cold that sinks bone deep, leaching warmth, leaving only the brittle echo of wrongness. My breath catches in my throat, a ragged sound I swallow down. Splinters from the kicked-in doorframe rain gently onto the antique rug. Dust motes dance in a single shaft of moonlight slicing through the room, illuminating the chaotic wreckage. Cushions ripped open, their stuffing like snowdrifts. Drawers pulled out, contents scattered like discarded secrets. The air smells of forced entry, of splintered wood, and the metallic tang of fear. But underneath it, something else. A faint, lingering perfume that isn't mine. My husband stands in the doorway, backlit by the hall light. His silhouette is rigid, trembling just slightly. His voice, when it comes, is a strained whisper, designed to sound like shock but hitting my ear like a performance. "Oh God," he breathes. "The house, it's..." He trails off, stumbling back as if overcome. I watch him through half-closed eyes, my body curled defensively on the floor. This isn't real. Not the mess that's undeniably violently real, but this. His reaction. It feels staged, hollow, like a theater set someone forgot to make look convincing. The fear I feel isn't just about the broken door, or the violated space. It's a colder, deeper dread settling in my gut. It's the dawning, terrifying realization that the monster might not have come from outside. It might be standing right there, bathed in the false glow of innocence.
My home is broken, yes.
But something inside my marriage just shattered with a much sharper sound. And the silence that follows is deafening. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Before this night, before the splintered wood and the performative terror, life was a house. That's the best way I can describe it. Not a home, not exactly, but a meticulously maintained structure. We lived in it, my husband and I, moving through its well-ordered rooms like actors in a play we'd both forgotten the script for. I designed websites, small businesses, local shops, gave them a face online, a digital storefront. It was quiet work, satisfying in its small way. Building something clean and functional out of chaos. A stark contrast to the chaos I was about to find myself drowning in.
He worked downtown, finance.
Long hours, late nights that became more frequent. He'd come home smelling faintly of expensive cologne and something I couldn't quite place. Distance had become the default setting in our marriage. Not shouting matches or slammed doors, just space. Growing, widening space filled with polite conversation and separate hobbies. We occupied the same rooms, ate at the same table, slept in the same bed sometimes, but felt worlds apart. Like two satellites orbiting a dead planet. We had talked, years ago, about children, about travel, about future plans painted in bright, optimistic colors. Those conversations had faded, replaced by logistics. Who would pick up the dry cleaning? What time was dinner? Did you remember to pay the bill? The silence between us wasn't empty. It was heavy, weighted with everything left unsaid. I wanted connection. I wanted to feel seen, heard, wanted. I poured that longing into my work, into making my corner of the internet feel welcoming and real. It was a poor substitute for the warmth I craved at home, but it was something. Our house was a beautiful cage, filled with expensive things and a suffocating lack of intimacy. This was our normal. A quiet, comfortable ache. Then the silence broke. It wasn't a crash I heard first, but a dull thud from downstairs, followed by a distinct crack. I was in my office, upstairs, finishing up a late-night client request. My initial thought was cat. Then the sound of splintering wood was unmistakable.
Loud.
Violent. Adrenaline surged, cold and sharp. My heart hammered against my ribs. A break-in. In our house. My mind raced. Where was my husband? He was supposed to be home. I grabbed the heaviest thing nearby, a large, ceramic paperweight, my hands slick with sweat. Stealthily, I crept towards the stairs. The air downstairs was different.
Cold.
The back door was open, flapping slightly in the night breeze, though it wasn't a back door kind of sound I'd heard. I froze at the bottom of the stairs, my eyes sweeping the living room. That's when I saw the mess. It wasn't just things knocked over. It was deliberate, destructive. And then I saw him, standing there, near the broken doorframe, looking. I couldn't read it at first.
Fear?
Yes, a performative tremble. But underneath? Something else flickered across his face. Something calculating. That's when he saw me. The performance clicked into gear. The breathless whisper. The stumbling back. He was already in character. Already playing the part of the terrified homeowner. And in that instant, standing amidst the wreckage of our living room, a new kind of terror bloomed inside me. The terror of realizing the threat wasn't just external. The first responders arrived in a flurry of flashing lights and urgent voices. Police cars lined our quiet street. The house, usually a silent sentinel, buzzed with activity. Officers moved carefully through the wreckage, their boots crunching on broken glass and scattered belongings. My husband was a picture of distress. He paced, ran a hand through his hair, his voice tight with what appeared to be shock and anger as he spoke to the officers. I sat on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket one of the kind neighbors had brought over, feeling strangely detached. My body shivered, not just from the cold air now rushing freely through the broken frame, but from the icy suspicion settling deeper inside me. An officer, calm and professional, knelt in front of me. He asked me questions. Was anything specific taken? Had we seen anything? Heard anything before the crash? I answered truthfully, or as truthfully as I could while my mind wrestled with what I'd witnessed moments before the police arrived. I described the thud, the crack, the splintering wood. I described seeing the mess. I described seeing my husband. The officer's gaze was steady, assessing. He was taking notes. My husband chimed in, his voice tight. It's just awful. We don't have enemies. Who would do this? Unless, he trailed off, looking pointedly at me. The officer followed his gaze. A subtle shift in the air. An invisible seed of doubt planted. Unless what, sir? The officer asked, his voice even. My husband hesitated, then sighed heavily. Nothing. Just stressful. Everything is stressful right now. He glanced at me again, a fleeting look I couldn't decipher, but it made my skin crawl. Later, when the main crew was canvassing the house, collecting evidence, another officer spoke to us separately. This time, my husband insisted on being present while I was questioned. He sat beside me, his arm around my shoulders, a performance of solicitous concern that felt like a physical weight pressing me down. The officer asked about our routines, if we had any recent arguments, if anyone had a grudge against us. As I answered, trying to keep my voice steady, my husband would interject. She's been under a lot of stress lately, he'd say, squeezing my shoulder a little too hard. With her work, you know, can be very isolating. Or, we had a disagreement earlier tonight. Nothing major, just couple stuff, but it was tense. Each seemingly innocent comment felt like a tiny needle prick, directing suspicion towards me. It wasn't just the break-in he was reporting. He was crafting a narrative. A narrative where I was unstable, stressed, capable of what? Staging this myself? Or maybe, in my supposed stress, I had left a door unlocked, inviting the intrusion? He never said it outright, not then. It was all suggestion, insinuation, a slow drip of poison into the officer's ear. I felt a rising panic, cold and sharp. It wasn't just him acting strangely. He was actively trying to make me look guilty.
But why?
What possible reason could he have? My mind reeled, grasping for explanations. Was this about the disagreement earlier? It had been tense. About money? We weren't rich, but comfortable. What could he gain from this? The questions spun in my head, unanswered, leaving only a vast, terrifying emptiness where trust used to be. The officers left eventually, leaving the house feeling colder, emptier, violated. Not just by the unseen intruder, but by the chilling performance my husband had given, the subtle accusations he'd woven into his words. He watched me gather a few things, his expression now just tired. The performance was over for the audience, but for me, The horror show was just beginning. "We should stay at a hotel tonight," he said, his voice flat. "I can't. Not here." I nodded, unable to speak. As I packed a small bag, I saw him making a call in the other room, speaking in low tones I couldn't make out. It felt secretive, furtive. The air between us was thick with unspoken things, with the metallic scent of a lie that had just crashed through our doorframe. I knew, with a terrible certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the break-in was just the beginning, and that I was trapped inside it with him. The next few days were a blur of hushed phone calls, insurance adjusters, and the heavy, lingering presence of the police investigation. They came back the next morning, forensics teams dusting for prints, taking samples. My husband maintained his facade of the shaken victim, though I noticed the tremble in his hands was gone when the police were downstairs. He was calm, almost calculating. The insinuation continued. When a detective called for follow-up questions, he was always there, hovering, adding little details about my recent behavior or my stress levels. He casually mentioned certain financial difficulties I had caused a lie. He sighed dramatically when asked about our relationship, implying vague, undefined problems that were somehow my fault. It was insidious. A slow, steady erosion of my credibility. I tried talking to him, confronting him gently at first. "Honey, why are you saying those things to the police?" He looked genuinely hurt, his eyes wide. "What things?" "I'm just answering their questions." "I'm scared, aren't you? This is traumatic. You keep mentioning my stress, our disagreements. It sounds like you're trying to paint a picture." His voice hardened, losing its carefully constructed tremor. "A picture of what? The truth? Maybe if you weren't so difficult lately, this wouldn't feel like such a shock. Maybe if you were more present, you would have heard something sooner. Maybe if you weren't buried in your work all the time." The accusations flew, each one a twisted distortion of reality, designed to make me doubt myself, to make me feel guilty for something I didn't do. He was gaslighting me, pure and simple, trying to make me believe I was responsible, somehow, for the violation of our home, for his actions. I felt increasingly isolated. Friends called, offering support, but when I tried to voice my suspicions about my husband, their voices would tighten. "Are you sure?" He seems so distraught. Maybe you're just overwhelmed by everything. His performance for the outside world was convincing. He was the grieving, scared husband. I was the stressed, perhaps slightly erratic wife. The narrative was taking hold. The house felt hostile. Every room was a reminder of the violation, but more than that, it was a reminder of the lie I was living inside. Walking past the still boarded-up doorframe felt like walking past a wound that refused to heal. I couldn't work. I couldn't sleep properly. Every shadow seemed to hide something. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps. The air was thick with tension, with my husband's unspoken accusations and my own rising fear. My fear wasn't just about being framed anymore. It was about being trapped. Trapped in a house with a man who clearly wished me harm, who was actively working to destroy me. What else was he capable of? The thought was a constant cold weight in my stomach. I was starting to believe his lies myself, the relentless assault on my sanity chipping away at my confidence. Was I crazy? Was I imagining this calculated malice behind his eyes? He grew bolder, more controlling. He monitored my phone calls, asked who I was texting. He suggested I take time off work, isolate myself. He wanted me alone, vulnerable, easier to manipulate. The house was no longer just a cage. It was becoming a sealed tomb. The walls felt like they were closing in. I was drowning in the deepening crisis he had engineered, and I couldn't see a way out. All seemed truly lost. I sat alone in the kitchen one evening, the silence amplifying the frantic hammering of my heart. He was out, meeting with his lawyer, he said, about the insurance claim. Every cell in my body screamed for me to run, to pack a bag, take my car, and just drive. Drive until I was free of this house, free of him, free of the suffocating lie. But where would I go? Who would believe me? I had no concrete proof, just a gut feeling, a series of unsettling moments, and his carefully planted seeds of doubt with the police and our friends. Running might look like an admission of guilt. My gaze fell on my laptop, sitting closed on the counter. My work. Building websites. Creating order from chaos. Bringing things to light. A small ember glowed in the pit of my despair. This wasn't just about surviving, it was about fighting back. Not with his weapons, lies, manipulation, destruction, but with mine. With clarity, with evidence, with bringing the truth to light. Even if it was just for myself, even if no one else ever saw it. I wouldn't be his victim. I wouldn't let him bury me under his lies. In that moment, a quiet, hard resolve solidified inside me. It wasn't a dramatic decision, no lightning bolt moment. It was born of sheer, desperate exhaustion and a primal refusal to be extinguished. I would stop questioning why he was doing this. The why didn't matter anymore. Only the how to expose him, how to survive, how to claw my way out of this darkness. The house was a battleground now, and I was finally ready to fight. I started small, careful. I didn't confront him. I didn't let him see the change in my eyes. I resumed my performance of the stressed wife, compliant, withdrawn. But beneath the surface, my mind was racing, observing, collecting data. I paid attention to his phone calls, the hushed tones, the guarded language. I noticed his new secrecy with his laptop, always closing it quickly when I entered the room. I started taking note of small things out of place, things that didn't fit the random break-in narrative. A drawer in the spare room that was meticulously emptied, not ransacked. A specific item of jewelry missing that wasn't particularly valuable, only sentimental. I started looking for clues myself. Not like a detective, but like someone trying to understand the architecture of the lie I was trapped in. I went through my own things, quietly, methodically. Nothing seemed missing that would indicate a random robbery. It felt personal, targeted. One afternoon, while he was out, I found it, hidden in the back of his closet, tucked inside an old shoebox. A small pile of cash. Not a lot, but enough to make me pause. And underneath the cash, a crumpled piece of paper. It was an unsigned letter. Short, terse. Referring to a job being handled and confirming an address. My address. The date on the letter was the day before the break-in. My blood ran cold. He hadn't just staged it. He'd potentially hired someone. Or maybe this was a payment to someone. It didn't make complete sense, but it was tangible proof that something was planned. But then I found something else in the box. A small, silver earring. Not mine. It was delicate, intricate. And instantly, I knew whose it was. It belonged to Sarah. Sarah from his office. The one he'd been having increasingly late nights with. The one who sometimes smelled faintly of his expensive cologne. Her. The other woman. The perfume I'd smelled that night came rushing back. It wasn't just a break-in. It was a setup. To frame me. And Sarah was involved. But how? And why were her earrings here? My resolve hardened into something cold and brittle. He wasn't just trying to leave me. He was trying to ruin me. To make me lose everything. The house, my reputation, maybe even my freedom. The fear was still there, a dull ache, but it was overshadowed now by a fierce, burning anger. He had underestimated me. He thought he could break me, confuse me, bury me under his lies. But I wasn't broken. I was forged in the fire of his betrayal, tempered into something hard and sharp. I didn't tell the police about the letter or the earring. Not yet. I didn't know how it fit, or if it would help or hurt me. I was playing a game I didn't understand all the rules of, against an opponent who knew my every weakness. But I had one advantage he didn't know about. I knew he was lying. And now I knew about Sarah. I kept the earring safe, hidden where he would never find it. It was my secret weapon. My proof. The police investigation dragged on. They seemed genuinely puzzled. No forced entry at the back door. As he had initially claimed, the frame was clearly broken from the inside. The front door showed no signs of tampering. It was messy, yes, but inconsistencies started to emerge. Things that were valuable left untouched, while things of little monetary value were destroyed. It didn't fit the profile of a typical burglary. The detective, a woman named Miller, was sharp. Her questions were quiet but probing. She asked about the tension in our marriage again. She asked about my work, my hours. She asked, subtly, about my husband's habits. I answered carefully, sticking to the truth, but adding small, almost imperceptible details. Yes, he worked late. Yes, he was stressed too. Yes, he'd been acting differently lately, but who wouldn't be after this? I didn't accuse him. I just planted my own seeds of doubt, small facts that contradicted his narrative of the terrified, innocent husband. The pressure intensified. My husband grew more agitated. He started snapping at me openly, his mask slipping. The polite distance was gone, replaced by thinly veiled hostility. He talked constantly about the insurance money, how it would solve all their problems, meaning my supposed problems that led to this. He seemed desperate to close the case, to get the payout. His focus wasn't on recovering from the trauma, it was on profiting from it. Then came the subpoena. The police wanted to interview us again. This time, separately. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The climax was approaching. I called a lawyer, a sharp woman who specialized in domestic cases. I didn't tell her everything, not at first, just that I felt my husband was subtly trying to implicate me and I needed protection. She listened carefully, her expression grim. Don't volunteer anything, she advised. Just answer their questions truthfully.
Be calm.
If they ask about the state of your marriage, be honest, but state that the recent tension is due to the break-in and the stress it's caused, not the other way around. Let them show their hand. Her words were a lifeline in the deepening crisis. I wasn't alone. Someone believed me, or at least believed I needed protection from him. I felt a flicker of hope, quickly followed by a surge of fear. The final confrontation was coming, and I had to be ready. The police station was sterile, cold. Detective Miller sat across from me in a small interview room. The air was thick with unspoken questions. She started gently, going over the night of the break-in again. My story hadn't changed. The thud, the crack, the splintering wood. Seeing my husband's performance. My growing suspicion. I described the chaotic scene, the cold air rushing in. Then she shifted gears. She asked about Sarah. My breath hitched. How did they know about Sarah? Had he told them? Had she? My lawyer, sitting silently beside me, gave a tiny shake of her head. Don't volunteer anything. Sarah? I asked, feigning ignorance. Who is Sarah? Detective Miller's expression didn't change. Sarah Jenkins. Your husband's colleague? They've been working closely together. Oh, yes, I said, keeping my voice light. I've heard him mention her. He works late a lot. I assume they work together on projects. Have you ever met her? Briefly, at a company Christmas party a few years ago. She seemed nice. I waited, my heart pounding, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. What was this about? Were they onto them? Miller leaned forward slightly. We found some unexpected evidence at your house. Evidence that doesn't fit with a random break-in. This was it. My lawyer tensed beside me. I forced myself to remain calm. Oh, I asked, trying to sound curious, not fearful. We found fingerprints, Miller stated, her eyes fixed on mine. Several sets that don't belong to you or your husband. Most of them are partial smudges. But there are a few clear ones. She paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. I held my breath. Was this about the letter? Was this about him hiring someone? One set, she continued, her voice low, belonged to a known associate. Petty theft, some minor property damage charges from years ago. He seems to fit the profile of someone hired to make a mess. We're following up on that. My mind raced. A hired hand, the letter in the shoebox. It was all coming together. He had staged it. To frame me. But hired someone? It was worse than I thought. Then she dropped the bomb. But there's another set of prints, Miller said, her gaze unwavering. A very clear set. Found on a picture frame in the living room, knocked off a table. And another on a drawer handle that was pulled out. She paused again, and then, very quietly, said, They belong to Sarah Jenkins. The air left my lungs in a whoosh.
Sarah.
Her prints. At the scene of the staged break-in.
But why?
What was she doing there? Was she helping him? Or was this something else? My carefully constructed composure threatened to shatter. Miller watched me closely. Do you have any explanation for why Sarah Jenkins's fingerprints would be all over your living room? This was the moment. My lawyer remained still, but I felt her presence, a silent anchor. I thought of the earring, hidden away. I thought of his late nights, the perfume, the lies. I thought of his desperate need to get rid of me, to profit from this. I didn't know why Sarah's prints were there, not exactly. But I knew it wasn't a coincidence. And I knew it blindsided him. I looked Detective Miller directly in the eye. No, I said, my voice steady, stronger than I expected.
Unless.
She was with him. Miller raised an eyebrow slightly. With your husband? Yes, I confirmed. He's been having late nights. He's mentioned her name. If she was there, maybe she was helping him. I didn't accuse him outright of staging it, not yet. I just introduced the possibility of her presence and his connection to her, letting her prints be the evidence that tied them together. It was enough. In the interview room next door, my husband had been confident, explaining away the inconsistencies in the scene, reiterating my supposed stress and volatility. He thought his plan was working. He thought he was steps ahead. Then Detective Miller's partner, who had been interviewing him, calmly placed a printout of the forensic report on the table between them. The report detailing the fingerprints found, including Sarah's. According to what I later pieced together from hushed conversations and official reports, he went white. His carefully constructed composure evaporated instantly. He stared at the report, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had planned for every contingency, every angle, except this. He hadn't accounted for her fingerprints being there. Had she been helping him? Or had she been there for her own reasons, leaving evidence he didn't know about? The details of her presence were still murky, a separate mystery woven into his betrayal. But her prints, undeniable and damning, were the variable he had failed to control. He stammered, tried to explain, to deny, but the words wouldn't form coherently. He looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting around the room. The detective watched him, silent, letting the evidence do its work. And then his face crumpled. Whether it was shock, the realization his elaborate plan had failed, or the knowledge that Sarah, the one person he might have felt something for, had inadvertently exposed him, I don't know. His hands flew to his head, he made a choked sound, and then, literally, he collapsed. Not dramatically, like in a movie. More like his body just gave up. He slumped forward, hitting the table with a thud, then sliding to the floor, unconscious. My win wasn't about being smarter than him in the planning. It was about surviving his attack, refusing to break, and being ready when his unforeseen mistake detonated his entire plan. My composure in my interview, the subtle way I introduced the idea of Sarah being with him, juxtaposed with his physical collapse at the undeniable evidence of her presence, painted the picture for the police far more effectively than any accusation I could have made. I hadn't planted evidence or tricked him. I had simply endured, observed, and when his meticulously crafted lie crashed down around him because of a factor he hadn't controlled, Sarah's fingerprints, I was standing, calm and clear-eyed, while he lay broken on the floor. The tables hadn't been turned by my action, but by his catastrophic oversight and my quiet endurance in its aftermath. It was a cold, satisfying victory. The aftermath was quiet, anticlimactic in its own way. The flashing lights were gone. The police tape was gone. My husband was gone. Arrested. The charge wasn't just staging a break-in. Evidence also pointed to insurance fraud and attempting to pervert the course of justice. The investigation into Sarah's presence and whether she was a knowing accomplice or involved in her own separate, ill-timed intrusion continued. I later learned she claimed she'd gone to the house that night, after he told her he was staging the break-in to leave something of hers she'd forgotten during a previous visit, and she didn't realize he'd actually gone through with his plan in such a destructive way until later. A story the police seemed skeptical of. The house was still a mess, but the oppressive atmosphere had lifted. It was just damage now, not danger. The air no longer felt thick with lies. It just smelled faintly of dust and cleaning supplies. I walked through the rooms, the silence echoing. The broken doorframe was a gaping wound, a reminder of the violence that had shattered my life. But it was also a symbol of escape. The cage was broken open. I stayed in the house. It was mine now, free of his poisonous presence. I spent weeks cleaning, repairing, slowly putting the pieces back together. Not just the physical house, but myself. The fear lingered, a phantom limb, but it was fading, replaced by a quiet exhaustion and a sense of profound, bittersweet freedom. I had survived. He hadn't broken me. The house began to feel like a home again. A quiet, solitary home. I still work, building my websites, creating order out of digital chaos. It feels different now. More purposeful. Like I'm not just building online storefronts, but rebuilding my own foundation. The experience left scars, deep ones. Trust is a fragile thing, easily shattered. The world feels a little colder now, a little more dangerous. But I also learned my own strength. I learned that I could stand in the face of overwhelming pressure and not collapse. I learned that sometimes the greatest victory isn't in the battle you fight, but in surviving the one someone else started. I keep the silver earring. It sits on my desk, a small, quiet reminder. Not of betrayal, not anymore. But of the day a lie crashed into my life, and I found the strength to stand in the wreckage. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear a version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.